Fellow Rwandans, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Rwanda, today it's 26 years after the carnage that happened in Rwanda in 1994. As we commemorate this 26th time of the genocide, therefore, I would wish to share with you a brief history that brought us to the Rwandan genocide and other killings that were associated with it. I send my warm greetings to you all. I wish you peace, development, and good health. The remembrance of those who died in the genocide has come in an unusual circumstances when the whole world is faced with COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, people cannot come together to support one another as would have been the case. However, in one way or the other, we have to remember our own. Therefore, I wish to share in a few words the true history that bred the genocide of the Tutsi people of Rwanda in 1994. Remembering and bearing with this bad history will be a firm foundation for the people of Rwanda to sort out their differences and hence to forge towards a country defined by lasting reconciliation and unity of the people. As we mourn for the victims of the 1994 genocide, the genocide committed by Rwandans against their fellow innocent citizens, it is wise to desist from falsehood and lies and the truth about what exactly happened in Rwanda decades before, during the time of genocide, and in the days that followed. This truth needs to be told, and with more emphasis on the Tutsi genocide. The hatred that led to this carnage 26 years ago today still seems as fresh as ever, regardless the political rhetoric to distort the truth. The hate that was mostly based on sheer ignorance by the Rwandan population, starting from the top, Rwanda's successive leaders since colonialism. What was the origin of this conflict? Before colonialists came into Rwanda, all was fine. And the difference at first was an economic one, where Hutu mainly did crop farming and the Tutsi tending to their livestock. And both societies lived alongside symbiotically. Gradually, these two classes came to be seen as ethnic divides. Cattle were considered more valuable than crops. And thus, this placed the Tutsi cattle owners at the level of the local elite. By the time the German colonialists first came in Rwanda in the year 1884, already the Tutsi elite had been the ruling monarch for centuries. And later, the Belgians comes in 1917. Both colonialists, the Germans and the Belgians alike, turned the Tutsis into symbols of colonial rule for the Hutu, who were the majority. This fake favoritism by colonialists to Tutsi was their usual divide and conquer tactic, which they later used to steer resentment and violence by the Hutu majority population, because the Belgians colonialists still needed enough time for exploitation. When the King Mutara III Rudahigwa started the process for demanding Rwanda's independence in the late 50s, they then used their tactic to incite division by supporting the Hutu against the Tutsi in the name of emancipation and democracy. The Hutu elite, who were mostly from seminary background, with enormous support and guidance from their colonial Belgians and the Catholic Church leaders, planned and executed the first attempt to wipe out of the country all the Tutsis in 1959 and onwards. Tens of thousands were killed, maimed, raped, got their property confiscated, and the rest of the majority Tutsis were forced out of their homeland. Many Tutsi women were held in bondage as sex slaves and laborers. It was a humanitarian disaster. All of this happened on the watch of the international community's watch. The then League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations organization, never said a thing to blame the evil that befell the Tutsi of Rwanda. I very well know that the genocide that happened in 1994 was planned. The local leadership incited hatred based on ethnicity to the Hutu population. Tutsi people were persecuted and expelled from their own country, beginning in 1959 and early 60s. The Hutu being aided by the former colonial masters and other foreigners who had interest in this country had the intentions to wipe out the Tutsi people in accordance to the teachings that they were non-indigenous people of Rwanda, but conquerors who came from Ethiopia, occupied the land, and dominated Rwanda. Therefore, with no doubt, the Hutu and their masters believed it was the right thing to do to persecute and expel these unwanted people who did not belong to Rwanda. Later on, the Tutsi refugees made efforts in successive attacks from neighboring countries of mainly Uganda and Burundi to try to return their people back home, beginning from 1963 to 1967. They did this without success. In 1973, after there was change of power to another Hutu president, a few Tutsis who had remained in Rwanda were persecuted, and there was another killing of the Tutsis. This caused more thousands to flee the country again. Efforts by the accumulated numbers of Tutsi refugees who were outside to negotiate their way back home were futile. Regardless, efforts made by the regional host governments and some international partners to help resolve the Tutsi refugee problem, the Rwandan government under President Habyarimana, backed by his Western friends, kept ignoring the issue. As a last resort, in 1990, the children of Rwanda from the Tutsi exiles launched an armed struggle to end this refugee problem. The Hutu, who never wanted the Tutsi back into the country, had to resist hard that comeback as ever. And this took another level of animosity from the Hutu who had the state power into their hands. Hutu leadership started planning for the killing of the Tutsi, as they had done way before in 1959 and 73. The Hutu-led MRND government made it a priority to focus on the war of denying the Tutsi entry into the country, vis-a-vis to embark on the efforts to make peace through the peace process that had been initiated. What is then the untold truth about the role of RPF in the Hutu killings? The RPF leader, Paul Kagame, planned and executed the Hutu peasantry killings from the northern border neighborhoods since 1991. These secret killings were headed and directed by Nyamwasa Kayumba with his notorious DMI, or Directorate of Military Intelligence, of which he led from 1990 up until 1997. The Kagame leadership killed the border Hutus mainly because they refused to listen to RPF political ideology and became totally unsupportive and uncooperative to RPF's objectives. Hutu peasants continued to make alarms when RPA passed in their neighborhoods towards attacking the FAR positions. They worked hand in hand with the FAR in cordoning and searching areas during the hunt of RPA soldiers in their areas. Also, the Hutu peasantry were resisting the RPA based on the MRND and Parmehutu hate policy towards the Tutsi that they had been thoroughly taught over decades. Kagame passed directives to Nyamwasa to kill and menace the Hutu along the northern border areas so that they can move to pave way for RPF attacks on the FAR forces. From late 1991, Paul Kagame and Nyamwasa Kayumba recruited a special commando group from within the RPA, mostly composed of young men who had come to join RPA from Kigali and other towns from all over the country. The Killer Commando Group, or RPA technicians as they were called, were easily penetrated into RPF cells throughout the country. The commandos, under direct orders of Nyamwasa's DMI, were directed to kill MRND opposition leaders, to do random killings, and then to blame it on the government, which was already targeting some moderate opposition leaders and Tutsis. When news of killings from the northern Rwandan border reached the interior of the country, the MRND leadership used it as an excuse to continue to incite more anger and continued to use the killings as a resource to perpetrate and achieve their genocidal objectives. From earlier starting with October 1990 invasion, the government made massive arrests of those Tutsis they called RPF accomplices, and Rwandan prisons were filled with Tutsis at that time. But at this time around 1992, the Rwandan government started killings of Tutsis in Bugesera, Kigali, Kibuye, Kibirira in Gisenyi, and many other places that had the concentration of the Tutsi. In their public speeches, the MRND and other Hutu political leaders continued to incite hate among the Hutu masses towards the preparation of the Tutsi extermination. In most cases, the Hutu population were directly involved with the FAR in fighting RPA soldiers, carrying with them whatever kind of weapons they could. They cordoned and hunted for the remnants of the RPA soldiers in the late days of the first phase of the war of October, November, and December 1990. In the second phase of the war, which was in around May and June 1991, the Force Armée Rwandese involved the Hutu population again. This time, they got involved in cutting banana plantations and clearing the area of any plant or vegetation to deny cover to RPA soldiers. Since Force Armée Rwandese was not strong enough to contain RPA, or Rwandan Patriotic Army, the Director of Military Intelligence, or DMI, groups always sneaked into the population, killed a number of them, and caused them to flee their homes. The numbers for the locals who were fleeing from the fighting between both RPA and the FAR, and also from the DMI assassinations, increased as the war progressed. In the Omutara region, the displaced people first settled in Rwebare, near Rukomo, in Muvumba commune. Later, they settled in Kiramuruzi of Murambi commune, and eventually tens of thousands of them ended up settling in a mega camp at Nyakyonga, near Kigali. With the growing insecurity, Kigali government, instead of working on the solutions to stop the war, which was to recognize the children of Rwanda who were fighting to come back home, this having been the very cause of the problems, but the MRND government concentrated their efforts on perpetrating ethnic hatred. They intensified their sensitization program on hate for the Tutsi people. Every Tutsi was targeted as an enemy or as an enemy sympathizer. Tens of thousands of the youths from the displaced population camps were joined to the notorious Interahamwe MRND Youth Wing and other Hutu Youth Wing groups, and all were well prepared for the cleansing of the Tutsi if Rwandan Patriotic Army would attempt to advance towards taking over the city of Kigali. The cleansing program for the Tutsi was disseminated to every Hutu peasant from all over the country through local leadership, from the grassroots levels, and the plan was mastered by all, in that when the D-Day came, nobody was to hesitate on what their mission was. The families of the Tutsi people from every town, village, and workplaces were marked way earlier in the process of genocide preparation. By the year 1993, tens of thousands of Hutu youth groups had been trained, and Interahamwe in particular had a military-like structure with a clear leadership and areas of assignment in which to operate when the genocide was to begin. There was good flow of information and networking with Interahamwe leadership and the rest of the state's security apparatus. There was flow of information between the army, the Gendarmerie Nationale, and the national intelligence bodies of Rwasiri and Sirote, all the way to the top MRND leadership. That's how vividly the act of genocide was prepared way ahead of time. It was well coordinated and perpetrated towards its thorough execution. Therefore, there should be no doubt that the Rwandan genocide for Tutsi people had more than enough time of preparation. On the other side, the RPA, led by Kagame and Kayumba Nyamwasa did not make a big difference with those who were planning the genocide, because they trained a special group of soldiers known as technician or commandos, and they distributed them all over the country to perform sabotage activities, kill the opposition politicians and innocent civilians, and then blame it on the MRND government. Opposition Hutu leaders were killed because, one, it was to create chaos and confusion among the Hutu themselves, because there was already the Nduga-Kiga divide, and these killings would definitely be associated with the ruling party MRND killing its political opponents. Politicians like Felician Gatabazi, Nzamurambaho Frederick, Emmanuel Gapchisi from the opposition were killed by RPA commandos. Also, they incited and worked hand in hand with the Bakombozi from the opposition party to kill Martin Bucyana. That's how the commandos worked. These are just a few people that I can mention from the opposition group. Number two, Kagame did not want Hutu leaders who would claim that they supported peace in Rwanda and hence become part of the RPF ruling system after the MRND government was gone. When Kagame and his henchmen, including Kayumba Nyamwasa, Kabarebe, and others, they decided to bring down the plane that was carrying President Juvenal Habyarimana and the President of Burundi on April the 6th of 1994. This served as a whistle to start the act of genocide. The shooting triggered off the killings that had been already in the pipeline and in the mindset of all Rwandan Hutu population. Thus, on the April the 7th of 1994, the genocide officially started all over the country of Rwanda as had been prepared. The Tutsi people were killed by their fellow Rwandans from the Hutu ethnic group like there has never been a God in this country. The worst human catastrophe of the 20th century broke out, and the killing spree went on for nearly the next 4 months uninterrupted. That was the Rwandan genocide for the Tutsi people. During the genocide, the Tutsi had nowhere to turn to. They went for God in 2 churches all over Rwanda, only to find these churches had been turned into slaughtering houses by their killers in the swamps. They were hunted by combined security forces and Interahamwe. Roadblocks were put in place to ensure not a single one is given a chance to survive. It was terrible. Wives gave away their husbands and their children. In-laws turned against their fellow in-laws. Uncles killed their own nieces and nephews. Church members against fellow church members from the Tutsi ethnic group. Church leaders either betrayed killed or gave away their flocks. The military and other security organs, in collaboration with the Hutu youth militias, were busy devising how well the mission of extermination of innocent Tutsi people would succeed for a very long period of time. The Tutsi humanity in Rwanda was heading to extinction, and they were surrounded and on target at every inch of that land. They had nowhere to turn to. The Lord God could not be reached anywhere near to save these souls that were nearing total extermination. Also, immediately after the takeover of Kigali, and probably in a year and a half thereafter, Kagame and Nyamwasa with their DMI network, in collaboration with a few other special officers from Kagame clique, started a new wave of Hutu killings. The killings that in most cases took also many Tutsi survivors, because when they were gathering the youth from all prefectures of the country, they deceived them that they were being recruited into the military, or telling them that they were taking them to safety. At that time, they could never tell who was a Tutsi and who was not. All the RPF needed was to kill a good number of the Hutu. The act was done by ferrying the youth from all prefectures of the country, starting with the western prefectures of Ruhengeri, Gisenyi, and Kibuye as a priority, and then sweep southwards to Changugu, Gikongoro, and Butare. As this was happening, the killings were going on in the Gabiro military barracks and surroundings into the Akagera National Park. There was already big force on the ground in areas of Byumba and Kibungo prefectures under the command of today's General Patrick Nyamvumba, who was being deputized by today's General Jean Bosco Kazura. Apart from the original killing sites of Campo Gabiro at the Presidential Lodge, also used to be referred to as Habyarimana's house, a building that they can now compare to the Jewish archways in Poland in the 1940s, and the so-called new camp, a camp that was formerly meant for the Akagera National Park game rangers. These were the oldest sites, used longer than the rest of the other sites in the Akagera National Park. Other killing sites were scattered in the Akagera National Park, distributed to each of the park lakes, namely at Lake Nasho, Lake Hema, Lake Rwanyakizinga, and Lake Hago, with surrounding swamp areas. The killing of the Hutu youth by the RPF under Kagame continued uninterruptedly for almost 1.5 years, from April 1994 up until December 1995. Other sites used for Hutu killings during this period between April to July 1994 and onwards till the end of 1995 were in the Nyungwe forest, which had 3 sites, and also in Izari Karama in the Bugesera area. All these Hutu killings were committed by the leadership under the orders and directives of the ruler of Rwanda today, President Kagame, Paul. Those Hutu killings are well known by Rwandans of all walks. There is no way these killings by RPF can be hidden. They are on record. In this period that we mourn for our lost ones in the genocide of the Tutsis, all Rwandans, Hutus, Tutsis, and Twas should focus on these historical facts mentioned here, which were based on ethnic differences and forge towards reconciliation and total unity of the Rwandans. At this time and era, the solution to the Rwandan problem is to tell the truth about what exactly happened in our country during those killings, more especially who killed who and where. I know that it will not be easy for those under current Kagame's leadership to accept their role into the killings of the Hutu. The leaders who had an upper hand into these killings will always fight hard to cover up this information and also try very hard to eliminate or mudsling all those who have the knowledge about these crimes. This in turn will keep the Rwandan people and the international community in darkness about what happened. It's now way too late. The information regarding the Hutu killings is out in abundance. Many of Paul Kagame's high-ranking military officers had an upper hand in the Rwandan Hutu killings, and hence a big number of the Hutu population lost their lives to the extent that the killings are no longer a secret. With time, it became to be known publicly, despite Kagame government's cover-up of its worst human violations. Human rights violations. The medicine to the Rwandan problems is sour, but it has to be tolerated and have to be administered if Rwanda is to recover from its bad history. The medicine is truth and reconciliation, and to bury lies to the grave that they deserve, and pave way for peace based on nothing but the pure truth. Both Hutu and Tutsi should accept their role in Rwanda's past. They have to ask each other for forgiveness. It's the right time to put our dark history straight. By doing that, Rwanda will have lasting reconciliation, peace, and total unity. All those who died were Rwandans, and there is no good death. All deaths are bad, regardless whether you are a Hutu, a Tutsi, or a Twa. Hence, it's sad that there are people who can't remember and mourn for their loved ones for the last 26 years now, since the Rwandan carnage took place. As we remember those who perished in the middle of the Rwandan genocide, Tutsis killed by Hutu, moderate Hutus, killed by fellow Hutu hardliners, Hutu killed by RPF commandos, and the mass Hutu systematic killings that were killed by RPA units within 100 days and afterwards. All these were death to the Rwandans. Therefore, the government of Rwanda should let the Hutu people also remember and mourn their lost ones. This will be a very big step towards unity and the reconciliation that we all crave for. I, the author, was harassed and persecuted. I fled the country for my life because of speaking out the truth about those killings and other gross human rights violations committed by the regime. Outside Rwanda, also, I have been threatened, and at one time in December 2019, Kagame's operatives here in the United States of America attempted to attack me for sharing my experiences, more especially about his role in General Gisarwegima's death. That won't stop me to carry on my purpose of spreading the message. My elderly parents were punished after I was able to escape my killer's death by the RPA and DMI killers. They lived degrading lives at the hands of these Kagame killers. My parents died in misery and total isolation. They were on Kagame's DMI watch at all times ever since I left the country. At their respective burial times, the DMI operatives were present to watch and count who was there and who said what. That's how the Kagame regime works. We are used to that. It won't stop us from revealing the truth. Unity and reconciliation are not possible with Paul Kagame and his group of killers still in control of the country, because the current leadership had a big role in most of these killings, both before, during, and after the genocide. It is clear, therefore, that they have to cover up their crimes to elude justice at any cost. Whatever policies adopted by the current regime regarding genocide or the killings that took place in Rwanda in 1994 and after, these policies will only be for either shielding the RPF killers from facing justice or for the purpose of economic benefits to the Rwandan puppet government under Kagame. But the policies will not be designed for the peace and reconciliation of the Rwandese people. In the regimes that preceded Kagame's RPF government, the leadership taught to the population hatred that was based on ethnic differences. Today, the same teachings are made by the RPF leadership. If you listen to public speeches by, for example, General James Kabarebe, Minister Kaboneka, and many other RPF leaders who turned into Kagame puppets. Those hate teachings by current RPF leaders makes no difference from those used by the MRND and the Hutu power leaders of the previous regimes in their public speeches to incite hate. Kagame himself made hate comments against the Hutu people on several occasions. An example is when the Hutu refugees were crossing into DRC, then Zaire, in 1994. Kagame standing somewhere nearby the Gisenyi-Goma border, he made the worst hate comment. He said that he wished all the hundreds of thousands of Hutus who were crossing the border would have been killed before they crossed to Zaire, while standing looking at them. I think the video and the audio evidences to that fact are available on record. All of these evidences of how much hate Kagame has for the Hutu ethnic group and those words spoken by a leader automatically represents his thoughts. In reality, today, after 26 years, when the genocide happened in Rwanda, the level of peace and reconciliation among the two Rwandan ethnic groups haven't been made regardless. The RPF government rhetoric leaned on soliciting praise from the international community. All Hutus in Rwanda today are treated as second-class citizens. They have no equal rights as their fellow Tutsi countrymen, no equal rights to government jobs, to promotions or courses into the police or the military. They have no rights to academic institutions, to do business with the government, and so on. There is obvious inequality of every life aspect. It's common knowledge that the majority of Hutus are called the Interahamwe, even if they were born way after the genocide of 1994, so long as they were born Hutus. Hutus in Rwanda today have replaced the Tutsis of 1954 to 1994. 1959 to 1994, They live in guilt and fear of the crimes they never committed. The new Hutu generation in Rwanda is required by the current leadership to apologize for wrongs of their Hutu relatives. They live similar lives to those of Tutsi survivors and remnants of the 1959 conflict, who lived to pay for reparations of the alleged crimes committed by the Tutsi monarch and their chiefs in the early centuries. They had to pay what was known as umusangiro. A cow could be slaughtered for meat, and enough local beers could be bought or prepared for the villages to combine and eat together, so as for the Tutsi people to be accepted and live within the Rwandan Hutu society, and thus to quell down their anger and hate that they had towards the Tutsi people. Those few Tutsis who were in Rwanda pretty much lived on their oppressors' mercy. Likewise, the Hutus, to be accepted in the current RPF government, they have to be traitors against their fellow Hutus. They have to be with some exceptional qualities that serves the interests of the clique in leadership, and at most of all, they have to be puppets to that small clique of leadership. Any Hutu assigned to a government office has no substantial powers, but powers lies with the assistants, because Hutus are not trusted by the current regime. They have no say to make any decisions and are looked down upon by their Tutsi subordinates. Today, 26 years after genocide, if you are a Rwandan Hutu who live outside and you met any foreigner, if you say you are a Rwandan, they will not accept you for a Rwandan because of the RPF propaganda they find on the media, which portrays Rwanda as a different people. Rwandans as a different people, rather. They hear about different developments than you understand it, which make you explain it differently. And too much of hand-quoted languages about the good things that are happening in today's Rwanda. Also, the hate ideology by the majority Hutu population from outside Rwanda has not changed from what it was before the genocide. If you talk or try to understand these people outside, it's evident that people are harboring a grudge for a revenge against the RPF Tutsis for having come in by force of arms and won the war of 1994. Some Hutu still utter the same hate speeches against the Tutsi as it was before 1994. And also, they embark on a change that is based mainly on Hutu benefits than it is for the cause of all Rwandans. The whole hate is still fresh as ever. I am writing this from a broad experience, living outside and relating with the Hutu people in exile. Hence, I really know what I'm talking about. I seriously mean it. I beg all peace-loving Rwandans who will read and listen to this piece and wish the genocide and all those other killings based on ethnic background not to happen again, to disassociate themselves from the hate ideology that has defined Rwanda to this date. The current government is using the iron fist to shut down and kill whoever tries to point fingers in their role of the 1994 and other killings in Rwanda. The truth must be told if there has to be peace and reconciliation of all Rwandans. And people ought to make sacrifices for this to happen. The sacrifices, I mean, you have to talk. We know Kagame kills from within and without Rwanda. But all those ones who love the country have to speak out. You have to advocate. You have to do outreach. That's how this problem has to be known and the solutions have to be sought. I, the author, am impartial in my writing, only that as a revolutionary and a human rights activist, I need to continue the career of my passion, pursuing a dream that I started at my younger age, in my early 20s, to join hands with other peace-loving Rwandans to continue help bring about peace to Rwanda through my experience and advocacy. I don't get paid or rewarded for what I'm doing, but it's my long struggle to bring about the change that the Rwandan people need so bad. I call upon all Rwandans to desist from ethnic-based differences but embark on cherishing being Rwandans and love one another as if we were brothers and sisters. As we remember the victims of the genocide, I have a few recommendations to share as follows. 1. I do suggest that the government of Rwanda, led by Paul Kagame, should continue with the genocide memorial programs, but should change some key things as follows. All human remains that has been displayed for more than a quarter century now in the memorial sites must be accorded decent and respectful burial. Enough is enough. It's on record and well known to the whole world that genocide happened in Rwanda. It is inhuman and humiliating for those who lost their people, me inclusive, to have the remains of our loved ones displayed for this long. It is also detrimental to forgiveness if we need true reconciliation to succeed. Secondly, I suggest that demonstration drills about how genocide was committed should also be stopped because it revives the emotions of the genocide to the survivors and the relatives of the victims. All that may cause adverse psychological effects to the society. Not only do those demonstrations affect the survivors, but also affects the Hutu population in that it makes them feel guilty of the crimes that was committed by their fellow Hutus. All these are vices to reconciliation. Thirdly, I kindly ask and suggest that the Kagame government should let the Hutu people, publicly remember their people who lost their lives in the genocide and the killings of the Hutu by RPA DMI commandos under Nyamwasa Kayomba that followed. I know the current RPF leadership will avoid the recognition of this sincere and humble idea because it will look like it is being implicated into the killings. However, there is no option. The fact that the Hutus were killed in the genocide is obvious and can't be concealed. The government of Rwanda of today have done all they could to fight this information coming out, but it's always hard to hide the truth. This is a fact. Many people said this way earlier, as early as 1994, 1995, until today. Everybody who tried to comment on the Hutu killings was killed earlier or was persecuted. Minister Seti Sendashonga and Kano Member of Parliament Rizinde spoke against these Hutu killings beginning with 1994, and they were both persecuted, ran out of the country, and they were followed up and got assassinated in Nairobi, Kenya. Madame Victoire Ingabire, who lived outside and came to try and make change as a political leader, said about the killings of these Hutus and requested that they deserve remembrance and decent burial, but she was framed and got incarcerated, and she's still being harassed now and was denied her rights to participate into the political process. The gospel singer Kizito Mihiga, a survivor himself of the genocide and the Tutsi, have been mentioning about remembering the Hutu who died in the genocide, more especially into his song. And he was framed, charged, got imprisoned, and eventually was arrested and got assassinated into a Kigali police cell. All these were killed or imprisoned and all persecuted because they talked about these Hutu killings that RPF doesn't want to be heard or known about. At this 26th commemoration of the Rwandan genocide, we must remember all those Rwandans that lost their lives within the days of carnage, Hutu, Twa, and Tutsi, and others that perished thereafter. This should be done not only because it is humane and appropriate, but to pave a true path for the peace and reconciliation that Rwandans yearn for. I stand with all Rwandans in remembering our lost ones. Please continue to be strong within these unusual times of COVID-19 pandemic. Let's work and pray hard that the killings should never happen again, and put everything under care of the Almighty God in prayers. I wish you all everlasting unity, reconciliation, and peace. Thank you all.